This little YouTube movie thingy will be about the Ten Commandments of Christianity. And before I really get started, I want to say one thing very clearly. I am not making this movie to coerce people to give up their faith in God. Personally, I feel that if your choice is to believe in the Christian God or any God, that's your choice. And I don't want to take that choice away from you, nor do I want to belittle that choice. The problem I am somewhat having with Christianity is not people being Christian, but people being Christian and therefore making other people follow their rules. I'm not saying every Christian does this, but to those Christians that do, please help me understand your Ten Commandments. I will read them, I will comment on them, and I hope you will comment on them too. And to begin with, in the Bible, I found three versions of what could be the Ten Commandments. Exodus 20, verse 1 to 17, or Exodus 34, verse 16 to 28, though I will read from verse 10, and Deuteronomy, well, I butchered that, but okay, 5, verse 4 to 21. And I will read all three of them, and I'll make a little bit of a comment about it. And I'm curious what you think I see wrong. And my first question would obviously be, if there is one God and he was the sole implementer of the Bible, why are there three versions of the commandments? Let's start with the reading of the Ten Commandments. I will start with the one from Exodus 20, verse 1 to 17. I'll probably make a few commentaries after I read it. Then I'll do the next one, etc., etc., etc. So I'm beginning with Exodus 20, verse 1 to 17. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image of any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that's in the earth beneath, or that's in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the father on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that's in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Okay, the first version, Exodus 21 to 17. And the first thing I find out is, you shall have no other gods before me. Okay, we knew that one. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that's in the earth, etc., 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 etc. So what's a likeness? And I know, because I remember from school that this commandment, or the version we're using, was the reason why the Protestants rose up against the Catholics. Well, one of the reasons, because the Catholics had statues depicting God, depicting Jesus, etc., etc., etc. But any likeness of anything, this includes pictures. Pictures are a likeness. So, are pictures allowed, or are they not? And if I read this, I'm to say, no, you're not allowed to take pictures. Come back on that one for me, please, will you? I'm curious if and why, or if not and why not, we are allowed to take pictures according to these versions of the Ten Commandments. Okay, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. What's his name? If I'm not to hold his name in vain, shouldn't I then know his name? You shall not murder. I always liked this one, because there's a difference between killing and murdering. I mean, if I am in a fight and I hit the other guy and he dies, I kill him. But if we're both in a fight, I didn't murder him. Shouldn't it be much clearer if we would say you should not kill? Something to think about. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Okay, who is my neighbor? Is everyone my neighbor? This is, again, a little bit, well, open to interpretation, and I'd like to hear what that interpretation should be. Personally, how I've always was told to believe what it means is, don't lie. You shall not bear false witness basically means you're lying, and you're not allowed to do that. I like that version, to be honest, the don't lie version. It's clear, don't lie, period. Yeah, but I'm not allowed to lie to him. No, you're not allowed to lie. But I'm not sure, is that the version that Exodus 20:16 means? And you shall not covet, well, clear. I'm not going to argue that point. This one is very clear. You shouldn't, if it's not yours, if it's someone else's, you may admire it, but you shouldn't try to think of it as yours. You shouldn't greed for it. Well, fair enough. Okay, so now I'm going to read the second version of the Ten Commandments. I'm going to start a little earlier. This is Exodus 16 to 28. No, it's Exodus 34, 16 to 28. But I'm going to start reading from verse 10. Then the Lord said, I am making a covenant with you. Before all your people I will do wonders never before done in any nation in all the world. The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. Obey what I command you today. I will drive out before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hittites, and the Jebusites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they will be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other god, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land, for when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices. And when you choose some of their daughters as wives for your sons, and those daughters prostitute themselves to their gods, they will lead your sons to do the same. Do not make cast idols. Celebrate the feast of unleavened bread. For 7 days eat bread without yeast, as I command you. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Abib, for in that month you came out of Egypt. The first offspring of every womb belongs to me, including all the firstborn males of your livestock, whether from herd or flock. Redeem the firstborn donkey with a lamb. But if you do not redeem it, break its neck. Redeem all your firstborn sons. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. 6 days you shall labor, but on the 7th day you shall rest. Even during the plowing season and harvest you must rest. Celebrate the Feast of Weeks with the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the feasts of ingathering at the turn of the year. 3 times a year all your men are to appear before the sovereign Lord, the God of Israel. I will drive out nations before you and enlarge your territory, and no one will covet your lands when you go up 3 times each year to appear before the Lord your God. Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything containing yeast, and do not let any of the sacrifice from the Passover feast remain until morning. Bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of your Lord, your God. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. Okay, that was the last verse of Exodus, 16 to 28, but I read 10 to 28. And I found it very different than Exodus 20, 1 to 17. For example, I did not know that the God whose name is jealous is a jealous God. Well, is his name then jealous? And if his name is jealous, should I then not be allowed to use the word jealous in vain? Because, as I read earlier, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, and his name apparently is jealous. Something to think about. Do not make cast idols. Now this one is far more limited than the versions of Exodus 1 to 17. A cast idol is logical. I mean, this is a statue made out of any metal, maybe gypsum, but anything you can cast. The celebrating of the Feast of Unleavened Bread seems more of a Jewish thing than a Christian thing. So maybe that's because it's the Old Testament? Could be, I don't know. And then the first offspring of every womb belongs to me, including the firstborn males of your livestock, but apparently also the firstborn males of your family. And you have to redeem all the firstborns with a sacrifice. Well, it's only the firstborn that needs to be redeemed, because all the other ones don't need to be redeemed. Don't they count? I mean, your firstborn son is your first, obviously, but any second son, third son, or daughters, don't they count? I don't really understand this. Why is the first one important, but everything after that, not so much? Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything containing yeast. Well, I mean, I could argue this, but at the same time, why would you do that? But then again, why would you offer anything as sacrifice? So I'm not quite sure on that one. But I do not understand the last one. Bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord. Okay, this I can understand. I mean, bring the best fruits, bring the best grains, fair enough. But then, do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. Not that I think it would be nice to cook something in milk, but other than that, it might not taste nice. Why? What's this even about? Anyway, that's Exodus 34:16-28. So now I'm going to the third version, Deuteronomium, the third version of the Ten Commandments. And again, I'm not starting to read precisely at the Ten Commandments. I'm starting a little bit earlier. So I'm starting at Deuteronomy 5 verse 1. Moses summoned all Israel and said, "Hear, Israel, the decrees and laws I declare in your hearing today. Learn them and be sure to follow them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. It was not with our ancestors that the Lord made this covenant, but with us, with all of us who are alive here today. The Lord spoke to you face to face out of the fire on the mountain. At the time I stood between the Lord and you to declare to you the word of the Lord, because you were afraid of the fire and did not go up the mountain." And he said, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing my love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God hath commanded you. 6 days you shall labor, and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Honor your father, your mother, as the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live long, and that it may go well with you in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not set your desire on your neighbor's house or land, his male or female servants, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And here again we have certain small things. Again with the murder, why is murder bad but killing okay? Personally I would say try not to kill. There's the same thing as the lying bit, the give false testimony. So basically Deuteronomy 5 verse 4 to 21 is in a lot of ways comparable to Exodus 20 verse 1 to 17. Why did I start reading from verse 1 in Deuteronomy 5? Well, two reasons. I said that there was only one version where it was said that God made a covenant with them, and actually I was wrong, because here again there is, well, made clear that this is a covenant between the God and the people he gave the covenant to. But another thing I find very interesting in this version is that the Lord spoke to you face to face out of the fire on the mountain. Okay. Now the first thing that comes to mind in my head is a volcano. After all, I mean, if God can appear, or not, as anything as he wants, why appear as what I read here, fire on the mountain, a volcano? And maybe silly of me, but I think this is the only time in the Bible that we can actually say, okay, this is how God came to you, and not as a voice or sending angels. No, he spoke from the fire on the mountain. And was the fire on the mountain really him? Or was it like the fire in the bush that commanded, I forgot his name now, to sacrifice his son? Seems to me something to think about. And again, in this version, you shall not make of yourself an image in the form of anything. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above. So again, you're not allowed to take pictures? I mean, this is how I read it. Is this what he means? And in all fairness, I mean, the people who wrote the Bible, which was written in Nicaea at the year 300 Anno Domini, they did not know that we would have cameras that could make pictures. But is it still talking about pictures? Are pictures not allowed? Is a painting not allowed? That's just something to think about. Now, I've written 3 versions of the 10 Commandments, and 2 of them are reasonably the same, and 1 of them is pretty different. Fair is fair. I mean, the goat thingy, I'm sorry, I'm not cooking a goat in its mother's milk. Yeah, it might be very important, but I don't really understand it. So, what is the modern version that we know of the 10 Commandments? I'm going to call these 2, or read them out, because I don't remember them all by heart. Fair is fair. The first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me, well, which comes back in all 3 versions. You know what, I'm not even going to say whether it comes back in all 3 versions, it's not that important. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Well, any graven image means anything. You're not allowed to draw anything. You're not allowed to paint anything. You're not, well, allowed to make a picture. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Again, my first question is, what is his name? And is his name indeed jealous, as in one of the 3 versions it was said? Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Honor thy father and thy mother. Thou shalt not kill. Now wait a minute. Nowadays we say thou shalt not kill. But in the versions I read earlier, it said thou shalt not murder. Now personally I'm happy that that changed. But why is it changed? I mean, I can't find it in Exodus or in Deuteronomium, because in both of them it says murder, and there's a difference between murdering and killing. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Now, when I said earlier, thou shalt not kill is a clearer commandment than thou shalt not murder, even though the change is kind of weird, because why would they have changed it? I would also say thou shalt not bear false witness would be clearer if it would be thou shalt not lie. Because basically, if you're not allowed to give false witness, you're not allowed to lie. But it doesn't say don't lie. So are there periods in time or situations where it's okay to lie? I'm not really sure. And then there's the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. Not thy neighbor's house, not thy neighbor's wife, servants, animals, or anything else. These are the modern 10 commandments. But not everything in the modern 10 commandments I can easily trace back to the ones in Deuteronomy or Exodus. And some of the things I found in Exodus I don't find back in the new modern versions. I mean, nothing about it on the Feast of Weeks, or not cooking a young goat in its mother's milk. How come one Bible with basically, well, let's say two, because Deuteronomy 5 and Exodus 20 basically say, well, they're roughly the same in 10 commandments. There's a small difference in, but it's roughly the same. But Exodus 34, 16 to 28 is very different. So how come the one book which is the Word of God already has two different versions of the 10 commandments, and yet still we have a third version of the 10 commandments which we now call our 10 commandments? Because the new version is not really what the Bible says. Again, my goal is not to say, haha, look at what you believe in, blah, 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 blah. I don't understand this. And, okay, I don't believe in it. Whatever. My question is, and you don't have to answer, what am I misunderstanding? How come there are three versions of 10 commandments in the Bible in the Old Testament? Then there are the 10 commandments which we all now know, but which are not really in the Bible. And why are some of these commandments so blatantly ignored even by people who call themselves Christian? I mean, I'm pretty sure that just about everyone in this world has a camera, has made photos at least once. And thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. I'm sorry, it's still not a clear thing. I mean, God is not his name, that's his title. He himself in the Bible says, I have to go back, but he himself says, jealous is my name, for I'm a jealous God. That's Exodus 13, no, Exodus 14. Exodus 34:14, sorry. Do not worship any god, for the Lord, whose name is a jealous God. So should we then not use the word jealous in vain? I don't really understand this. And it's easy to make a joke, and it's easy to blah blah blah. But I seriously like to hear your point of view in this. Maybe I'm really misled. And maybe I'm not. I mean, okay, I can't convince you, maybe you can't convince me. That's not the point of this small movie. The point of this movie is, okay, what do we believe?